Hey.
It's a live show, what can we say?
Yeah, and sometimes you're talking right in the middle of your live show. Hey, everybody. It's Saturday night. Welcome to All the Things. I am Monique Duson, and you are?
I'm still Krista Bontrager.
Also known as Theology Mom.
Yep.
This is the show where we talk about all things related to God, life, and the Bible.
We're just a couple of gals graduated from Biola trying to figure out our way in the world.
That's true.
Can you talk more in your mic, Monique, there?
I need to talk more in my mic. I don't know. Can you all hear me out there? Hi.
And helping us on the show, giving us microphone directions and telling us when our mics are hot during the opening is Bob, official button pusher. And there's Abby in the
Abby in the background?
She's studying for finals. So she's got AP US History on the brain tonight.
There it is.
And we want to encourage all of you to help us out by sharing the show. That's a really practical way to help support the show, is just hit that share button.
Hit that share button. And if you're watching and you're on YouTube, let us know where you're watching from. Say hello.
Yes.
We see Cynthia Hampton and Laura Hartley. Hello.
And we want to say thanks to Cynthia for sharing the show. Yay!
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Now,
yes.
2 weeks ago and last week, we announced that we were going to do a Family 210 drawing live on the show.
That's right, because Family 210 is our family clothing sponsor. And so we asked people to share the show.
Yes.
And then send us a screen cap.
Now, I know that people shared the show. I saw people sharing the show.
I know. But not a lot of you sent the screen cap.
Nope. Nope. But one person did, and that one person will be getting a Family 210 t-shirt.
That's right.
Do you know who that one person is?
I think I do. Are you going to say?
Are you sure? I don't know. Maybe you should say.
No, I think you should say.
Laura Hartley out in
Wiley, Texas.
Yes, Wiley, Texas. I didn't know where I was going to say she was in Waco. She's not in Waco. She's in Wiley, Texas. Yes.
She's on chat room right now.
And she is. Congratulations, Laura.
Yes.
Yes.
You are the big winner. She won it fair and square, people. She's the one who sent in the screen cap. So, yes. She's happy.
Yes.
So she gets the shirt of her choice from the Family 210 store. And
Awesome.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes.
All right. And then last week was a good show.
Yeah.
It was a good show. We talked about the Jude 3 project and their new curriculum that came out.
Yeah.
It's a small group study. It is okay. Like we said, I said I liked about 80% of it.
Yeah.
I think
I liked 90%.
It was a high number. Yeah. Good. There were some things to watch out for.
Yeah.
James Cone and other people that platform liberation theology and critical race theory.
Yeah.
And so we said be careful about that. But didn't have a lot of
overall. There was a lot of
negative to say.
Praiseworthy things there. We also talked about some crazy Bible interpretation.
That's my favorite. I like that one.
Monique's been saying that all week.
Yeah.
Bah, 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 bah.
So if you missed that show, make sure to catch it either on Google Play, Spotify, Apple Podcast,
yes,
or on our YouTube stream.
That's right. And we do want to invite all of you to join us on the chat. We try to check Facebook. It's a little bit more clunky to check Facebook during the show, but definitely in the YouTube chat box, if you want to pop over to YouTube, we'd love to have your voice in on the conversation. And so what did you do this week? How was your week? I'm asking you for once. I was like, I'm setting a goal tonight. I'm going to ask Monique how her week was.
She beat me to the punch, you guys.
I'm so bad about it.
Okay. So this week was a whirlwind.
I know.
I don't know how deep to get into it, but I will say.
Maybe say what you did last Sunday, or maybe say what we did yesterday.
I don't know what we did yesterday.
We made a trip down to...
Oh, yes. I was like, people, my weeks are busy. Okay, so last Sunday, the organization that I work with, back in July, I had a crazy idea that around Christmas time, kids should get Christmas toys. And
you work at a resource center
for low income, yes.
homeless people.
Mm-hmm. Low income and or homeless. And just started a crazy idea, a sign-up sheet and registration, and ended up with about 400 kids registered. Their parents actually saying that they wouldn't be able to afford Christmas toys this year, and so
you got Toys for Tots.
We had
Toys
for Tots deliver.
You can't imagine how the truck threw up in the building. Like there were so many toys. People's generosity was unbelievable.
Between Toys for Tots and different organizations that help sponsor us within the community, I would easily say that there were probably somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200 toys donated.
The best was the scary doll corner.
Where
you had like
the porcelain dolls and the babies are live and they're like, I can't even. I don't like those dolls.
We really should have had the video that you shot.
It was a mess. But yes, that was last Sunday. We did a nice event for the kids and parents.
Community.
Parents got to come in and shop, so to speak.
They had gift wrapping.
They were able to gift wrap their toys. Kids had a bounce house and hot chocolate and arts and crafts. And the community just really came together to help support those in need. And so it was a really nice event.
And we really had no idea how large of an event this was until we came to bring Monique lunch.
I appreciate that lunch. Because I was hungry.
There were hundreds of people there. We were like, oh my, this is really a big deal.
Yeah.
You had really organized something there. So,
and a big thank you to all of our volunteers, because it takes a ton of volunteers. I think we had 60 to 70 volunteers between all of the prep work and the day of event and things that are happening after the event, and making sure that any child who wasn't able to come still gets their toys. A lot of work, but definitely worth it, and worth it to see the smiles on the parents' faces and the kids' faces. So that was Sunday.
All right.
And the rest of my week.
Yes.
And then yesterday we went down to Biola, hung out for a little bit, got to meet with the Dean of Talbot.
Monique has big plans, people.
Yes.
She has big plans.
Yes.
She has really stumbled into something.
I don't know if I have like big plans or if, I'm just kind of tiptoeing into water that I think the Lord could be leading me into. I'm not sure.
We'll keep everyone posted.
We will keep you posted. Yes, the Dean of Talbot, Dr. Clint Arnold. Yes.
Ooh. Right. Well, we'll leave them in suspense right there.
It was really interesting. Yeah, it was good.
All right, so let's do the show rundown.
Awesome.
What are we doing?
Okay. Well, first off, the Southern, now I'm going to mess it all up. You guys, I am saved, but when it comes to Christian definitions and terms, I don't know all that stuff. So the SBC,
that's
not
what
the
I'm
SBCA, SPC, see?
The SBC,
the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah.
Back in
June
of this year, did a resolution for an Article 9, which they accepted, and that was the acceptance of critical race theory within, as a framework within, or they call it or consider it an analytical tool within their denomination. So the acceptance of critical race theory within their denomination.
Right.
And there's been...
And not just their denomination, the churches, but also the seminaries. And so it's...
Yeah, please explain all of that.
It's very wide. So we're just doing the rundown, but we'll get into all the details. But we're going to look at the new documentary that just came out a couple weeks ago about this.
So there was the acceptance of Article 9, and then there was a little preview snippet to a larger documentary about the acceptance of Article 9.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the documentary. We're going to talk about the adoption of critical race theory into the Southern Baptist Convention, some of the implications. So that's going to be kind of the top of the show.
That'll be the top. But what that brings me to is the larger topic of culture and Christianity.
Yes.
And how the church, and maybe I'm wrong, but how the church at times adopts culture and allows for culture to dictate the movement within Christianity, as opposed to us being a force and a stand against culture.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, you guys think differently. Chime in and let us know.
Yeah.
But I think that's more of the concern. It's like, yes, this is just one of the things. Like they've accepted critical race theory or critical theory, and But what else do we accept, and how else do we see that play out in the church?
I can tell Monique's really excited about the topic because she's already going into the topic. We're just doing the rundown. But she's ready.
You know what? Hi. I'll just sit here and,
All right. So a couple of days ago, in other news, I posted an article on my public Facebook page that was really an amazing summary of my experience in the Reformed tradition. And I've talked a few times vaguely on the show about that. But then I got a bunch of private messages, which almost never happens as a result of the post, where people wanted to know why I left the Reformed tradition. And I don't get people asking me that very often. But since a number of people private messaged me about it, I thought I would talk about it a little bit. And as sort of a follow-up to that post. And then we're also going to have
the tweet of the week. Yes.
Which is always a fun surprise for me.
Yes, it always is. Because I never quite know what the opening's going to be, what the tweet's going to be. And by the time I do find out, I am just surprised. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Now, we should probably tell people, we really try hard and intentionally not to make this the race show.
Yes, we do. We really do. We don't sit up on like Thursday and say, "Hey, how can we talk about race again?" No.
But the race topics just sort of find us.
I know, and I feel like it's either an email or some kind of message on Messenger, something. Have you guys thought about, or like conversations in the week?
Can you comment on this?
Yes. And I want to say like, no, but then somebody else will say, "Oh, have you thought about this?" And I'm like, man, maybe. Yeah. I had a good conversation with our good friend Amanda Whaley this week, and it just like authentically came up, and I was like, oh, okay.
Here it is again.
Yeah, here it is. And people have questions. And so I think that having a safe space to ask questions is good.
Yeah.
But to your point, no, we don't go out and like search the dark web looking for race conversations and race topics every week. I don't even, the dark web is, well, all of the internet is the dark web to me. I don't know what else. I mean, Twitter is the dark web.
Yes.
Yes.
So the thing I think you bring up, though, is I think that maybe why this keeps coming up is that it is so authentically just out there in our culture. Mm-hmm. And since that's sort of like the big topic of tonight is Christianity and culture. And we should probably say at the outset, like, you and I still have a ton of things that we're trying to figure out about the relationship between the church and culture. Yeah. And like, this is not the show where we're going to unpack all of that and the great mysteries of things. But the church has, throughout its history, had a struggle with its relationship to culture.
Oh, and, I can believe that.
Is birthed under a government that didn't want Christianity. And for the first 300 years, it wasn't even a legal religion. It wasn't something that people could practice out in the open. And there was a lot of opposition to it. And then you get into a period under Constantine and following that, where Christianity is adopted sort of as a national religion, and the church and the government get all kind of mixed up together. And then you have the Reformation period, and after that, where we're sort of floating in Judeo-Christian values as a culture that sort of reflect the church, but the church and culture the church and government become separate entities. Now we're in a situation of a post-Christian culture where it's almost like the hostility toward the Christian church is almost circling back to where it was before Constantine. And so we struggle as Christians with knowing what is our relationship to the culture.
Yes, I don't know all of that history.
Oh,
but
I just did there's a little survey there.
But one of my concerns, and one of the things that has concerned me for a while, is our relationship to present day culture. And it often feels like in my experience being in church, like, oh, we're not talking about what's happening out there.
In the real world.
Yeah. Do we not know? And it doesn't mean that we need to adopt, but are we aware of the conversations that happen Monday to Saturday and even on Sundays in some circles, and how that impacts the congregants that then come to church on Sunday?
And that's one of the reasons why we started this show in the first place, was because you and I were having conversations and you just kept saying, well, why is no one talking about this? Where's that show? Where's the show where people are talking about real life?
Yeah.
And the struggles of being a Christian in this culture. And that sort of why our tagline is, this is a show where we talk about God, Bible, and real life, because it's not always easy to know our place as Christians. And are we doing a good job of that? And I remember when we first started talking about critical theory and critical race theory and all that stuff, I said, man, this just seems like it's so new. Like it just came out of nowhere after the 2016 election. And you're like,
where have you been? Are you
new?
No.
You're like, I was talking about these things 20 years ago at Biola, and they've been around for 20 plus years prior to that. And I was like, really? And so this is all for those of us who haven't been paying attention. It just felt like it all came out of the blue. Now it all makes sense to me now that I've looked at it. It's just the natural extension of postmodernism. But in the beginning, I was like, I don't understand any of this.
Did you just do the Blake Shelton from The Voice finger?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yes.
There's that, folks. Okay, so let's get into it, right?
Yeah.
All right, because we're already halfway into it anyway.
Yeah.
Southern Baptist Convention does this big vote. I guess it's their national convention back in June.
It's the largest Protestant denomination in America. In the country. Yeah. And I mean, we should make it clear, like the Southern Baptist Convention has roots that go back to the Civil War.
Yes.
And there's a reason why they're called the Southern Baptists.
Yes, because the Northern Baptists, or I guess the regular Baptists, I don't know how you want to define them, they were against slavery. Yeah. And they were more in the movement of the abolition of slavery. Yeah. And so the Southern Baptists, good old people in the South, were for slavery. Yeah. And then there was
a break off. Yeah. And I actually have a video on my YouTube channel about this and chronicling one of the prominent Southern Baptist seminaries, and it's publicly racist roots that the four of the key founders were all members of the KKK. Like, this isn't some exaggeration or historical redaction. Like, this is
just known. It's there. Let's just call a thing a thing.
Yeah, look at history for what it is. But in 1995, the Southern Baptist Convention passed a resolution back then, kind of repudiating and trying to distance themselves from their racist roots. But for many people, there was a sense of dissatisfaction with that. They felt like there really wasn't enough that was happening in terms of, maybe we could call, I hate to use this word because it has a particular meaning, but I can't think of a different word, is equity of leadership.
So they weren't seeing enough leadership, enough diverse leadership across the board. Is that
qualified diverse leadership? Yeah. And so now we're in a situation where some of the Southern Baptist seminaries, Southeastern Baptist in particular, is really kind of advocating for aspects of critical race theory. And so that led to the events in June with the passage of Resolution 9, which I think Bob has a screen of the resolution. If people want to check it out, I'll put it in the show notes. But the question of what is our relationship to critical race theory and intersectionality, maybe you could give a brief definition of what that is.
So intersectionality looks directly at oppression and how many different ways a person could potentially be oppressed. So women would be oppressed to men, but because I am a Black woman, the place where my womanhood and my African Americanness or my Blackness meets would be an intersection.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So you would be in a more oppressed category than I would.
Because you would be a white woman.
Right.
Yes.
But if you were a black female and a lesbian, you would have even...
I would have 2 intersections. So I would have, or 3, however you want to look at it. But if you were a white woman who is a lesbian, you would have 1 intersection because this is where your oppression intersects, your womanhood and your lesbianism.
Okay. So that's what that means. So in particular, the line of debate is this line number 2, whereas critical race theory is a set of analytical tools that explain how race has and continues to function in society. And intersectionality is the study of how different personal characteristics overlap to inform one's experience. This line is really the genesis, in large part, to this new documentary that just came out a couple weeks ago. It's called By What Standard?
Yes.
And it is put out by a group within the Southern Baptist Convention. I call them the dissenters. It's called Founders Ministries. And they are trying to push back on the infiltration of social justice, critical theory, critical race theory, feminism, and all of those connected ideas, in saying, no, these are not just analytical tools. This is
actually a framework and a worldview.
Yeah.
And they're pushing back specifically against critical theory, the umbrella that houses things like feminist theory, queer theory, and critical race theory.
And I think a lot of people would probably be like, man, this is so academic. Like, why? How does this pertain to me? But this is really going to pertain to a whole lot of people in about 5 years, when you have a slew of graduates coming into hundreds or thousands of Southern Baptist churches that have been educated in these seminaries where critical theory is being taught.
Yeah.
And that is going to start trickling down to the pews.
I mean, I see that now. I think I told everybody about a graduation I went to earlier this year, and seeing people who were proponents of critical race theory at that graduation, and just what that means as a young person coming into the church and wanting to come into leadership, and, housing these ideas in this framework. But I think we have a clip that we're going to go to.
So this is the opening scene from the documentary, and all of our apologies to the filmmakers. We hope you know that we're just playing this because we want to give you guys some promotion.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to steal your content. We want to encourage people, go watch the whole documentary.
Yes, please do. It's highly informative.
Yeah. So this is just the opening scene. And just to set the stage here, that you're going to see 3 gentlemen sitting at a table. The guy on the left is a Christian. The 2 guys on the right are agnostics or atheists. They are what they would characterize themselves as liberal progressives, but they do not buy into critical theory.
Yes, Peter Boghossian is the one sitting on the far right, and he just wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal maybe 3 weeks ago
that we tried to talk about on the show last week, but thank you, Wall Street Journal, for hiding all your articles behind a registration wall.
But he really talks about how academia is becoming just swayed by critical race theory, and there's really no real room to come against it or to stand against it.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Okay.
I have had in the back of my mind that if this were at the height of the new atheist movement, and when, we were extremely involved in that, if I wanted a plan, if I were going to design a plan to bring right?
Oh yeah, I know
to
where you're
bring
going.
the whole thing down.
All of Christianity. Let's end Christianity. How do we do it?
Yeah, how would you do it?
Make them woke.
Yep.
It'll eat itself from the inside.
Yep. And then
I'm not the old guard atheist I alluded to earlier. But if I were the old school angry atheist, it's like, let's just throw rocks at the cathedral till it falls down. I'd start making woke pastors and sending them in. Because they're going to tear everything apart.
Yeah.
Because they're going to make everything about identity.
It's inevitable.
And that's all they talk about.
That got our attention.
Yes, that was.
That got our attention because we had watched another documentary with these two gentlemen the night before and talking about their project, which would be a whole other great video to do sometime. But it got our attention like, wow, they even see the danger of this.
The atheist can see the danger of accepting this worldview within the church and how catastrophic and destructive it is.
And how against historic Christianity it is. Like, oh, if you want to destroy the church, you don't need to throw rocks at a cathedral or burn it to the ground. You just need to get
your pastor's woke.
Yeah.
But we can't see it.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Do you want to go right to the next clip or do you want to?
We can unpack this one a little bit more. I want to hear your thoughts about it because that just got my attention big time.
Well, again, this brings me to Christianity and culture and how, and I may sound a little harsh. I'm going to put that out there at the outset. And you've, brought me correction on this and offered, me some guidance and been like, hey, slow down. It's not like the whole church or, watch your language. And I'm still struggling because, and I'm just going to be honest, folks, for me, it feels like the church is not talking or not up on game with what's happening in culture. Yeah. And because we're not understanding the movement of culture, then we accept anything that may sound good. So this, and I don't know if you're giving me the look, and you guys feel free to chime in.
No, go.
And I'm open to hearing it, but it sounds like, or not even but, and for me, it feels like, we're not having these conversations, race or gender or, other things. And so the world sees the need. The world sees the hurt, they see injustice, they see however you want to define it. And then they begin to have these conversations and say, hey, you guys aren't talking about this. You need to adopt this. But what if we had a heartbeat on culture as well? And it doesn't mean that we need to adopt culture by any means, but if we understood more of what was happening, if we were maybe a little bit more outward, I don't know.
I think that what you're highlighting is that in the church, we have a tendency to just talk about certain topics. And I think that part of the reason that critical race theory has made such inroads into so many formerly conservative or still conservative on paper churches and seminaries is because it offers a way to live out your faith in a very tangible framework. It's like, okay, I believe in Jesus, but I don't want to just sit in my church. I want to go out and show the world love. I want to go out and make a difference and show that Christianity really makes a difference. But there hasn't been a lot of that happening. There's a tendency in the church that we form our own kind of parallel culture and we get in our little ghetto mindset of, we're just going to talk mostly to each other. Mm-hmm. And we don't pay attention to the larger consequences of the ideas that are happening in the world around us. And by and large, Christians usually come along to the culture conversation a bit late. And so meanwhile, the culture's having discussions about, hey, we're noticing these marginalized people, and hey, we know that there's needs here, and hey, we want to do some things. And then the church is left behind because the perception is we're not doing anything. And so I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yes. And I mean, it brings me to the question of how do pastors shepherd people who are going out on the Monday through Saturday and hearing these conversations and experiencing the life that happens at the workplace that may be infiltrated or infested with CRT, and then coming back into church. How do we deal with that part? Like, how do I bring healing or hope or some kind of acknowledgement to the real experience that person is experiencing in culture.
Yeah. And sometimes there's a tendency, I think, for us as evangelicals to not tie our faith in to the real world and what is happening in culture. What are people talking about at work? One of the reasons I wanted to start this show in the first place was to kind of show people how theology comes to bear on real life, on all of these conversations we're having in the culture, and that historic Christianity does have things to say. But I think that sometimes some churches get so caught up in how can we become like the culture? How can we sort of blend into the culture? Which I think that is a different error. You know, I'm not interested. Do people need to know about critical theory? Yes, they do. Christians need to understand some things about critical theory, but they need to do so that we can reach people with the gospel by understanding how they think.
Yes.
Not so that we can become like them.
Yes.
Those are two different reasons and motivations to understand critical theory. I don't want to become like the world.
Yes.
I want to tear down every framework and every construct that comes against the gospel and the Most High God. But I have to know something about how these people think.
Yes, and you highlight something that's really important, because when you don't understand how people think, or what at least a small basis is of their construct, then you're able to accept because it might sound good.
Yeah.
Because we want to love, and we'll talk about that later on, but we want to love, and so because we want to love, and this sounds warm and fuzzy at the outset, then, oh yeah, we should probably accept this.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the second clip here, and we thought that this offered a really good kind of overview, historical overview of where critical theory comes from.
Yes.
And it's a little bit of an extended clip, but this guy gives a very nice little history lesson. So let's watch this about the origin of critical theory.
And what's going on, we've got to start with Marx. Okay, Karl Marx believed that the world, everything in the world was just matter and energy. He was a materialist. Everything is physical. And as a result, he saw all of history moving forward in terms of one economic system being replaced by another. And basically everything was determined by the economic system. The politics, the religion, the ideology, everything was there to preserve a particular economic system. Now, he predicted that there would be a proletariat revolution, a revolution of the urban workers. It didn't happen. So you get an Italian communist named Gramsci in the early to mid 20th century who looked at the reason why, and his conclusion was that the problem really lay in what he called the hegemony. That is to say, essentially the worldview or the ideology that the bourgeoisie, the propertied classes, promoted. He said the problem is the proletariat bought into the hegemony. And so what we need to do is to create what he called a counter-hegemony. The idea here being that we're going to come up with a new ideology, a new worldview. This will be done through a combination of the intellectuals and the workers that will give them an alternative way of seeing the world and help them realize the fact that they're really oppressed. Further, he extended it beyond just economics. And this is particularly what's going to happen in much more detail after Gramsci with the Frankfurt School and other thinkers. They're going to argue that oppression isn't just economic. It's not just owners versus workers the way it was in Marx. It's all kinds of other forms of oppression. And so the world divides up, in Marx, the world divides up between owners and workers, which correspond to oppressors and oppressed. In these new worldviews that are emerging out of critical theory, oppressors and oppressed go way beyond just owners and workers. It's racial oppression, it's sexism, it's homophobia, it's transphobia, it's Islamophobia, it's fill-in-the-blank phobia. It's all of these things. So they're constantly looking to find new oppressed classes to join in their vision of a better world brought about by bringing down the oppressors and theoretically at least raising up the oppressed. And critical theory is really built around an analysis of society that says that everything really revolves around power structures. And the power structures are there to keep the oppressors in place and to keep the oppressed in their place. There are a lot of other ideas that tie into this. They think of everything in terms of a zero-sum game. The reason why racism exists is because whites take power from people of color. The reason why sexism exists is that men take power from women. It's a zero-sum game. There's always, in order for one person to move forward or one group to move forward, they have to take power away from someone else. So it's all a power game, and it all really builds around politics, it builds around language, and a whole host of related issues that fundamentally come back down to the idea that matter and energy is all that exists. It's all materialism. And everything that we think we know about the world is conditioned by our culture. It's conditioned by the hegemony. So if you can control the hegemony, you can control how people understand the world, and you can literally change reality. All of that is wrapped up in critical theory.
Well,
oh, we cut off his last line, but his last line, or somewhere in the video, he says, but this has only been around for 60 years.
Yes.
You know? And so Christianity has been around for 2,000 years. And I think that I'm always a skeptic of a new paradigm, or somebody has a new theology or a new framework or a new way of seeing things, and then they want to bring it into Christianity. I'm like, look, my job is to contend for the faith once for all delivered to the saints. Those things that are all agreed upon among us. My job is not to incorporate every newfangled sociological idea into the church. Or 20 years ago in the 90s, we were incorporating marketing and business ideas into the church for church growth programs. That's not my concern. My concern is to contend earnestly for the faith once for all delivered to the saints. I want to contend for the faith of the apostles and the martyrs. I want to contend for that faith. If there's a framework that came about 60 years ago, that's interesting. I want to know about it, because right now that's the water that my children are swimming in. That's the water of the culture that, that they're swimming in, and they don't even realize they're swimming in it. That's the messages that are coming through all the media and all the education, all the books, all the conversations on social media. It's all coming through that filter, that worldview, that lens. And I want to know about it. But I'm not going to rush to bring it into the church.
Yes.
I need to keep these worlds separate. And that summary, it shows how complicated critical theory really is.
Yes. And also, one of the things that I liked that he said at the end was how it's connected to so many other things. It's all the phobias. If you accept this one view, then you're just naturally accepting this other view. One of the things that you brought up a couple of days ago or a week ago or so, about our talk at WIA and explaining exactly how critical...
Women in apologetics. Yeah.
Yes. Hello, I'm wearing my shirt, Women in Apologetics. Sorry. Please excuse there we go.
There it is.
The break. But one of the things that you mentioned is critical theory is like a train. And so when you have critical theory as the driving engine, right behind it you have critical race theory. Right behind that, hooked together in the next car is feminist theory. Hooked in the next car would be
queer theory.
And then in the next car
there's other cars coming.
Yes. And what I didn't want to talk about because I don't know enough about it, but fat studies. And
fat activism.
Is another version in this critical theory vein. So it's just another car. They're all hooked together, and you can't say that I accept this one because I like what it does, but I don't accept this one because I may not be for LGBTQ theory.
Right. And this is the conundrum that the Southern Baptists are getting into, because they want to accept critical race theory. Like, okay, yeah, we want to have race conversations and that's good, but they want to reject feminist theory and queer theory. But at the end of the video on By What Standard is the video documentary that we're talking about tonight, the filmmakers show how feminism and queer theory are already coming into the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yes.
And people don't understand. These are cars that are all hooked together. And you had the analogy of the mouse.
Yes. The mouse. So I don't know why I know this, but like if a mouse can get his nose through the tip of any opening, he's able to like wiggle his body all the way through the other parts. And that's kind of how I see critical theory and all of the other subsequent cars. If one part is able to sneak through, all of the rest of it is going to come through too. But again, in looking at...
under the banner of equity.
Yes.
Everything is about equity. You have to understand that our culture is now in a conversation where the highest good, the highest moral good is that of equity and justice. And so when they say, well, we don't want you to impose your morality on us, they're not saying that they have no morality. They're just saying they have a different standard of morality. And that is what they are going to say, here is what is good, true, and beautiful. Their version of equity. But that train is eventually going to get into feminism and queer theory and conversations about equity, because if there's no room for, this group of oppressed people or victims, then there's no room for this group and this group and this group, and along that train goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is why it's important that we understand what's happening in culture. We don't have to accept what's happening in culture. And in my opinion, we should be a voice against it, and we should be leading a different way. We should have our own train.
Yes.
And we should be on a different train to show culture. This is how we do it. This is what really works. Because in the end, this isn't going to work. This is a framework that's not going to work. Let's just be clear.
Because it gets people just pitted against each other.
Yes.
And silencing each other. If you don't get into there's only one view that's allowed.
Yeah.
There's only one outcome that's allowed. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get in line with that, you will be silenced.
Yes. Cancel culture.
Yeah.
But in not understanding that, like I said earlier, we will accept or we will dabble in. And this, people, is not something that we can dabble in. We cannot, I think my grandmother used to say, like, you don't give the devil a pinky because he'll have you up to your elbow. This is one of those things. You cannot dabble in this and think that you won't be swallowed whole by all of the other parts that come with it.
I think that it's hard because technically, and I think Neil Shenvi made a really good case for this in his response to Resolution 9 that was passed by the Southern Baptists in June. He says, technically you could call critical theory an analytical tool, but that's really not how most people use it. Mm-hmm. Most people use it as a theoretical framework or as a worldview, whatever term you want to call that. And so while this is technically on paper accurate, that they can just sort of use it in this limited kind of a way, nobody uses it that way. Yes. And that is the real conundrum. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, no one uses it that way to the extent that if you don't see it this way, you will be fired.
Yes.
If you don't see it this way, then you are standing against the gospel. This is not just like, oh, let me put on my glasses because I can't see far away. No, this is the glasses that change everything. I'm standing against God and against the gospel. So basically what they're saying is that their analytical tool tells me that I am wrong in my definition of gospel and my definition of my life experience and my service to God, so to speak. But how does an analytical tool do that? No, that would be more of a framework or an ideology.
Yeah.
Unless I'm wrong.
No, and I think that it's important for people to understand that then the outcome of using this so-called analytical tool of critical theory, you have to then, if you're going to import it into Christianity, you have to start having different conversations about redefining critical doctrines. Doctrines like the original sin, repentance, forgiveness, the gospel itself. Yeah. And so they can say on paper, I affirm inerrancy, I affirm all the historic doctrines of Christianity, but then they've got this framework that they want to put on it. And we already see these redefinitions trying to happen at the seminary level. And regular people need to care about this because woke theology is coming to a church near you.
Yeah.
And if you are on an elder board, if you are in church leadership, you need to know about these things so that when a pastor comes to candidate at your church, you can recognize this. You can ask questions in the interview. What do you think about social justice? Yeah. What do you think about woke theology? Mm-hmm. These are the questions people are going to have to start asking in job interviews when you're interviewing a new youth pastor, a new senior pastor, when you're having conversations about who's going to serve on the elder board, because where leadership goes, the local church goes.
Yes. Let's get to the third clip.
So finally, we're going to see here Vodi Bakum, who has a PhD from Oxford. I think it might be in philosophy or religion. He is an amazingly brilliant mind. I don't agree with Vodi on every jot and tittle of what he says, but boy, I sure agree with a lot of it. And
he actually is a dean of a seminary in Zambia.
In Zambia, yeah. He and his family are missionaries in Zambia. So let's check out this clip from Vodi Bakum that talks about what has made so many Christians open to adopting critical race theory, or at least aspects of it. Let's check it out.
It gives us virtually no hope.
Yeah. Here's what's ironic. What's ironic is the reason that many in the church that I speak to are willing to let down the guard and welcome this stuff in is because of their love for their brothers. You've got a lot of people who look at ethnic minorities and say, I love you, I get you, let me hear you, you know? And I say it's ironic because the accusation is you don't love, you don't know, you don't understand, you don't listen, and you've got guys who are actually opening the door to a worldview that is foreign and that is hostile because of the desire to hear and give the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. And here's the irony. Right now, seminaries who really want to see minorities brought in, here's the dilemma they face. If we bring one in who's one of us in terms of theology, worldview, so on and so forth, the accusation will be tokenism.
That's right.
He's not really black.
That's right.
Because critical theory is not part of what he's bringing. And then if we bring one in with critical theory, we're bringing someone in who's not part of what we're committed to delivering and communicating, right? Those things most certainly believed among us. So it's really a catch-22. Mm-hmm. And then if you do bring someone in and you know, critical theory starts to rear its head, well, what do? Do you get rid of them? Because now you're the racist who wouldn't let them have their voice.
There are certain white pastors.
Okay.
All right. We haven't gone to the comments.
Let's do that.
Let's see. We'll let's see here. Kimba says, in my opinion, it's meant to silence people as well as divide them so the powers that be can use them for their own ends. I do think that CRT is a means of silencing people. I'm not really sure what you mean by use them to their own ends, but I can say that what I see like in different social media groups and things like that, or even in council culture, the goal of a lot of it is to silence the oppressors, so to speak, silence those with power, silence anyone who disagrees with you and may not, be on the train, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think that there's an aspect of it. There's a different part of the video that we're not playing the clip tonight, but the idea of power and those who are in power, that one of the key components of critical theory is to redistribute power. And that could come through redistribution of wealth, which is connected to its Marxist roots. But really the primary exercise is about redistributing power.
Yes.
And how you get there is very interesting, but that is a key component of an outcome, and that is brought out in the documentary as well. But what do you think about what Vodi says here, Monique? Because I was really struck by his insight that a lot of, I think, he didn't say this explicitly, but I think he's talking about white people, like what makes white people so vulnerable to adopting aspects of critical race theory. I think it's because many Christians genuinely want to know how to love their family and friends who are people of color. They want to know how to do that. And this framework comes along and says, here's how you do it. I don't think this is a biblical way of doing it, but this offers some tangible hands and feet of here's some steps that you can do.
Yes.
And I think that there was a vacuum created because we weren't having these conversations in the church. And so then critical race theory just has come in now and said, okay, here's some steps. Here's what you do.
And here's what you don't do. And if you do this and don't do this, we will cancel you.
Yeah.
To me, what just pops in my head is just love your neighbor as yourself. You know what? I think sometimes we can make it so difficult. And that doesn't mean that there aren't things that make us different. We have different skin tones. We have different hair. We like there's things that are different about us. But that's what I was saying about how does a pastor shepherd his congregation? Because it's when I come back into the church from being in the world those other 6 days, then I'm like, hey, wow, I'm getting, you're loving me like you love yourself. Like you're not, I'm trying to think of a good example, but there's a genuine love there. Like you're not gonna ask me a question that you wouldn't yourself want to be asked. You're not going to do something to me that you wouldn't want done to yourself. The way that you do ask questions or inquire about things like my hair, for so to speak, would be in a way that would be gentle and respectful and not anything that would be harmful to you. And we're open to conversation if it is harmful. You know what I mean? Like we love each other.
We allow for mistakes.
Yes.
We have grace.
Yes, there's
forgiveness.
all of that.
Yeah.
But when we bring in the world's culture, there's none of that. And instead, what you get is...
There's no forgiveness in this theory.
Because you're my oppressor. And I have no need to go to coffee with you or desire her. Like, that's what this boils down to. This framework boils down to, I am oppressed and you are my oppressor. Accept it, acknowledge it. You should be repentant and continually repenting. And I need to, I don't know, hold it over you, so to speak.
But I see such potential here. Monique and I are just starting these conversations in the last week of how do you turn this into a good, like how do you turn this into an actual evangelism strategy? Because a year or two from now, these young people in their 20s are going to be emotionally exhausted because this paradigm doesn't actually lead to utopia.
Yeah.
It's not that train. You get on this train and it just leads to anger, division, striving. It's never enough. And there's no redemption. There's no permanency of redemption. There's no forgiveness. And equity, that this grand goal of equity, you can never actually get there. I'm wondering... I feel so sad for these young people in college right now in their 20s because they think they're buying into this great system of salvation, that this great worldview that's an alternative to their parents' faith. And it's going to lead them to this emotionally broken place. And I'm wondering, how do we turn that into an evangelism opportunity? How do we turn that into, let me tell you about the water that never dies, that never runs out.
Or how do you turn this into unity?
Yeah.
Because this road is not going to lead us to unity.
Yeah.
Annette says, in rural and small town Ohio, I haven't noticed anything like that. I tend to go to small churches where we tend to stick with the Bible. And Annette, that's awesome. I think that is absolutely amazing. What I can say about Ohio, though, is that I know that this framework is deep into Ohio State University. And so be on the lookout. I hope that it doesn't come to small town Ohio.
But when you send your kids to college,
Yeah.
this is the worldview that they will be taught from. This is even in Christian colleges. This is the framework, even in Christian colleges, that they are getting. And so just know that you can avoid it to some degree, but this is what the emerging generation is getting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty universal. Okay, now for the big question.
Yeah.
Should people use 2 hours of their life to watch this documentary?
Yes.
You think so?
Yeah, or I mean, they could start at minute 37. if you don't want to see the other 8 articles before Article 9, I'd say start at minute 37. It actually starts about 37 and 20 some seconds in. I say start at, oh, you know what? Actually, it's a little bit before 37. It's actually like, what did I say earlier?
29.
28, 29. Be safe. Start at minute 27. And then you'll
forward.
be there for about an hour.
Yeah.
Hour and...
A little more than an hour and a half.
Yeah, a little more. So I would definitely say...
Go watch it.
Watch it. And then you'll get a better understanding of, how it is creeping in. This is the largest evangelical denomination in our country.
Yeah.
And if they're being plagued with it, I can't imagine what everybody else is going
And
through.
I've always perceived the Southern Baptists as being so conservative, but this has made an inroads in a really big way in a really short amount of time. And the way that the Southern Baptist Convention goes usually is a leader for other denominations. And we're already seeing the Presbyterian Church in America going down this path, and other denominations that have been stalwarts of conservative Bible theology, but they're going down this path with much rapidity. And so just know that that's out there. Would you say that this is a fair and accurate, representation of critical theory, or is this more like a propaganda film that's designed to just scare people?
This is it. This is it. When they showed the trailer, at first...
The trailer we did have some comments about the trailer. The
Yeah.
trailer was very sensationalistic.
Yeah.
And it looked like it was going to be a propaganda film.
Yeah, but I feel like it's fair. I think that even the more that I continue to learn about critical theory, whatever you fill in the blank, I think that it is a fair representation, and the concerns put forward are very fair and valid. And then there's also snippets from different people who are proponents for critical race theory or critical theory. And those points of view we've talked about on the show. There are a couple of snippets in the film that we've shown on the show. So I think that they put forth a pretty balanced view, and definitely a view of why it is so important that we stand out and speak out against it.
Maybe say where they can watch it. Where do you?
Yeah. So again, you can get it. I'll put it in the show notes. But if you just Google "By What Standard" documentary, and you go on the Founders Ministries website, there it is. And again, these are I call them dissenters in the Southern Baptist Convention. The main person behind the documentary is a pastor named Tom Askell. And sadly and unfortunately, just this last Sunday, he collapsed while preaching in his church and is in intensive care still, as I checked today. But hopefully, Lord willing, he will recover, because he has been a big voice of speaking out against this error and kind of leading that charge and encouraging others to go that direction. Our friend Susanna said that this is a difficult topic for her to understand, but I can see how this can cause censorship, lack of freedom of speech, and propaganda if you have a different world view. And I know that Susanna is more in a bit more of a mainline denomination. She's in the United Methodist denomination, but she's a student of Scripture. She's a former student in my Bible class, and I know she loves the Lord and is really trying to wrestle with how progressive theology has come into her denomination and trying to learn how to sort this all out. So I commend you, Susanna, for those efforts. And it is hard. Kimba says, I can't stand watching the train wreck happening around the world. It is hard. It is emotional. I mean, there's some days that Monique and I get sick of it. We'll wake up and we're like, no race conversations today. We can't do it.
Not today.
It's hard. It is very hard. And I asked Susanna a clarifying question. What's hard about it? Is it hard to understand? Is it emotionally hard? She says it's hard to understand. I agree with you, Susanna. I think I've said this before on the show. I've spent 25 years of my life in academia and education. This is by far the hardest thing I have ever worked to understand. It has taken me 15 months to really start to get a grip on it. I feel like I'm starting to really be able to understand all the terms and what they mean and the framework and putting it all together. But it has taken me hundreds of hours of study to get to this point. And our hope is to help give you guys some shortcuts so you don't have to go through the pain and misery that we've gone through at times. But I agree with you, Susanna. It is a very hard concept to understand.
It is. And I think another thing that makes it hard is the definitions change.
Yeah.
And things change to fit
there's
the
very
framework.
Very specific definitions, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, our friend Jawad is here. Yay, we were missing you.
Oh, there he is. Okay. My feet took me a little while. My feet needed to reboost.
Yes, but Jawad, we're glad you're here. We were just talking about you this week and say, where has he been? So we are glad to see you here. He wants you to put your YouTube address in the description. I don't know if they allow us to post links on chat, but we will try.
Yes.
So we will do that.
Try.
It might block us.
We were just talking about you.
Yes.
Said we missed you. And Kimba says, it's not about the subjects for me. It's about issues being hijacked by evil people for their own evil purposes. Kimba, I don't know that I agree with that 100%. I think there's
a lot of well-meaning people.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, I think that each person is created in God's image, and the image of God in me wants to see certain things happen in the world because of who he is and who he has made us all to be. Like, we all have dignity, value, and worth, and those things are to be esteemed, and those are the things that we uphold. And we uphold those because of the likeness of our Father in us. And so when I see something like injustice, it immediately strikes a little thing in me, not because I'm this awesome and amazing person, although sometimes I think I am, but because of the Father's design in me. And I think that's also the same for them. Like, they want to affirm someone else's dignity, value, and worth. They just have bought into a system that is not historically Christian to be able to do that.
I think it's really well said. And I like how Vodi Bakum said it, that many of these people are motivated by love. They really want to know how to love their neighbor better. And I'm very hesitant to say that they're evil or they have evil motivations. I think in many people in the church, these leaders that are buying into this, I think they probably want it for right reasons. They're just not going about it in a very good way. Our friend Jeremy, who I'm super glad is here, that he's chiming in tonight, says, about 5 years ago, I learned that some of my former Sunday school students got caught up in critical theory. It broke my heart, but it began me on a journey of trying to understand this worldview. That's awesome, Jeremy. I know that you are in ministry, and we commend you in that as you are laboring for the gospel and to bring truth to your students. Oh, look at that sweet comment he's making.
Yes.
Your ladies are part of God's answer to my prayer that God would raise up some people who would push back against critical theory.
I will say, Kimba said, Mo, that's why they use issues. They use manipulators and abusers will get you in your emotions in order to control you. And this is why we must be versed in the word. This is exactly why. Because people will try to manipulate or control or whatever. I think the best stand to take, though, as Christians is to believe all things and hope all things that are good for our brothers and sisters. So I'm not going to take a stand that says, oh, this pastor, even though he is woke, is trying to lead me astray.
Yeah.
My hope would be that he is trying to care for those who are people of color, who may be experiencing injustice and oppression, and however those things are defined. But not that he would or she would intentionally be trying to lead me astray.
Yeah.
My hope is that, and my belief in my heart as another Christian brother and sister, is that they really do want to do good.
Yeah.
So before I jump there into misuse and abuse, I'm going to stay within, the confines of like, hey, how can I love them? How can
we start a conversation?
Yeah.
How can I
how
ask
can
some
I-
strategic questions? How can I help them think about this?
Yeah. Because, just automatically assuming that it's evil, misuse, abuse, may shut down conversations that I'm really looking to have. So, but thanks for your comment. I really appreciate it.
All right. We've been talking about this a long time.
A long time. I say it's time to move on. I don't know if that could be like a little song in my heart. Like,
Moving on up. We need the Jefferson.
Moving on up. Oh. Y'all, I should not be singing ever. Ever.
Okay, we do want to make sure that all of our friends are going to be part of the Women in Apologetics Conference.
Women in Apologetics. It's like my superhero. Yes.
Because there is exactly 1 day left to get the early bird rate. So you need to go on their website and get connected. And if you can't join us in person at Biola University in January, be sure to what? They're all.
Monique's in the shot.
Oh, Monique's
Am I? Hi.
Be sure to.
Hi.
Our podcast viewers, our listeners are like, what's going on?
I don't really know myself.
But we have a big announcement that if you can't come to California to the conference in person, the live stream is now going to feature selected breakout sessions. So it's almost going to be like you're there.
Yes.
And so it's going to be all the plenaries, the worship, and strategic.
Oh, that's me again. Excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me.
I'm trying to do the announcements here.
Sorry. I'll step back. Hi. Pardon me.
So it's going to have this
Don't mind me,
strategic.
Say that word again.
Strategic.
Strategic. We have officially gone off the cliff, folks. We have officially.
All right.
Okay.
Breakout sessions. We're going to be doing a breakout session
on critical race theory
as a worldview.
Who guessed that's what we'd be talking about? Yes. Laura Hartley says she's already registered. Yay!
Yay, she's coming to the live stream.
And let's just say Women in Apologetics is not just for women.
Yes.
Our ministry platforms women apologists, but content is open for everyone.
Everybody.
Yes.
So, and even our friend Juad could sign up for the live stream. He's there in Great Britain. He could sign up and...
Juad's in Great Britain? How did I not know this?
Yeah, I think he's in the UK. I think he told us that once.
Oh, wow. Okay, I missed that part.
So,
yes, Jeremy, that goes for you too.
Yeah. And so it's not just a lady conference. It's just that all the speakers are ladies.
Yeah, it's a lady conference.
Yes.
There's great days in there, isn't it?
Yeah, we usually get like 5 brave men that'll come. But,
yes.
Yeah. My husband will be there. Bob will be there. You can hang out with him. So, all right. Women in Apologetics. 1 day left to get the early bird rate. So go to Women in Apologetics. What is it? .com? .org?
WomenInApologetics.com.
All right. Go there. Get signed up. It's such a cheap conference. It's like $45 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the live stream is so reasonable. So go get connected with that and you will not regret it. You're going to hear some amazing speakers.
You guys gonna do something there, right?
Yeah, we got some dog and pony show that we'll be doing there on critical race theory.
Watch it on the live stream.
If we get selected to be on the live stream.
You're gonna be selected though, right?
I hope so.
Okay.
We're hoping. Since I was the one pushing it.
We have something with puppets we'll do.
Who's gonna select it? Who's going to make the...
I don't know, the committee.
Shall we flash their phone number up on the screen?
Yeah, we could do that.
Have them...
Yeah, we can start a social media campaign.
People, let's keep things moving forward.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, so I posted this article a couple of days ago on Facebook, and it was an anonymous article written about what the author was calling spiritual abuse in Westminster Seminary, California, not to be confused with Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia. And there was an alumni who wrote this article. And his name is not Timothy Cho. That's a pseudonym. But I posted this on Facebook because I said, this exactly describes my experience in being in United Reformed churches in Southern California. We were in multiple churches in Southern California in the URC, where the pastors were all educated at Westminster Seminary in California. And this article exactly describes many of the reasons that my husband and I left the Reformed tradition after several years, because of the culture. And I've tried to describe this over the years to people, and I've struggled because it just sounds so preposterous, some of the dynamics that I would describe. And when I read this article this week, I was like, yes, I'm not crazy. This and this and this. And I showed it to a couple of my friends who were there at the same time as we were at the church. And they also agreed with me that this was an amazing description, accurate description of our experience in a United Reformed church in Southern California. Now, I can't speak for all United Reformed churches everywhere on the planet. But what I know about United Reformed churches here, at least in Southern California, and with ministers who come out of Westminster, California, this article was just right on about the culture that was created in a lot of these churches. And this is just one quote, but from the article, it says, there was a lot of talk about grace. And I would say the doctrines of grace. You know, the Reformed are big into the doctrines of grace. There was a lot of talk about grace, but there was never a culture of grace. Oh my gosh, I need that like big bold letters, because that is the summary of everything that we experienced there. The high view of grace that we learned when we were Reformed, I mean, that was really what attracted us so much to becoming Reformed, was the doctrines of grace. But once you're in the churches, at least here in Southern California, the culture itself in the Reformed tradition was so legalistic, and it was not grace-oriented at all. And it says, pastoral abuse in the surrounding United Reformed churches and Orthodox Presbyterian Church was covered up and hidden from view because these men were confessional. There was a view of the pastoral leadership that if they were the ones who were abusive and in treating their congregants abusively, you were never allowed to criticize them. You were never allowed to even have a voice. And people who did try to speak up about this were either put under church discipline or told to leave. And it was just such a sad situation. And it was a culture where the doctrines itself were more exalted than actually how we treat people. So everything was about pursuing doctrinal purity, but then we could treat people like crap. And it was just a weird situation. So anyways, I posted this article, and the response I got from it was pretty amazing. I had a ton of people private message me about it.
So you have some questions.
Yeah.
Is this related to Calvinism? Kimball wants to know.
Yes. Reformed theology is another term for Calvinism. And these are the people, the stream of Christianity that comes out of the Reformation and believes in the great doctrines of predestination and grace and perseverance of the saints and all of those things. So people in this stream would be Michael Horton, Kim Riddlebarger, Robert Godfrey. Those are all Westminster, California people. People also in this stream in the Presbyterian Church in America that people might know that is Reformed is R.C. Sproul. He was not part of the California thing, but those would be kind of the three big names at the California seminary.
Then Juad wants to know, do you baptize your kids in the Reformed Baptist Church? He says you do not baptize your kids in the Reformed Baptist churches, right?
Yes, Juad, that's a very perceptive question. So among Reformed Christians, there is one stream that are Presbyterian or what we call Reformed or Dutch Reformed. They baptize their children. Then there's another stream of Reformed Christians that broke away from them, and they believe in what's called believer's baptism. And they hold to a different confession. I think it's 1689. And if you've ever heard of a man named Charles Spurgeon, he was a Reformed Baptist and adhered to the 1689 Baptist Confession. And from the Reformed Baptist tradition is where you eventually end up with Southern Baptists.
Oh.
So many Southern Baptists are quasi-reformed.
Okay.
And so if you're in a Reformed, Presbyterian, Orthodox Presbyterian, Presbyterian Church in America, those all baptize infants, and that is the more of the ancient faith way of doing it. If you're a Reformed Baptist and you hold to the Baptist Confession of 1689, then you believe in believer's baptism. They do not baptize babies. You have to have a confession of faith in order to be baptized. It's a very good question. I really want to know how Juad knows so much Christian theology. He knows quite a lot.
Let's see. Susanna?
Yes.
Says, I went to a church that talked out of two sides of their mouth. Grace works.
Yeah, it's sort of like that, Susanna. You might enjoy the article if you go Google the title. You can find it really easy. I think it was on medium.com is where it was published. But it was such a refreshment to my husband and I when we first were getting into the Reformed tradition because of all the talk about grace and the doctrines of grace. But then when you get into the culture, it was very oppressive and works oriented. So.
And then Kimba says they don't believe in miracles for today. Are they cessational?
They tend to be fairly cessationist. However,
That means what?
That miracles are really not for today. They would often make fun of evangelicals who believed in miracles. They would often make fun of charismatics. However, when you get more in the Baptist, Southern Baptist tradition of the Reformed Baptists, some of them are a little bit more open to miracles. But by and large, the Reformed people tend toward the cessationist end of the spectrum.
All right.
Juad says predestination means God elected his people from the beginning, right? Yes. And so this brings me to the thing that everyone wanted to know about, because in my post, I made a little side comment of, I'm no longer Reformed, but I left the Reformed tradition, but I stayed Reformed in my theology for many years after I left the Reformed tradition. I just didn't want to be in those unhealthy. We didn't want to raise our kids in those unhealthy churches, and so we left the Reformed tradition. But my husband and I were still both, by and large, Reformed in our theology. But about 5 years ago, we migrated away from Reformed theology because, well, I guess there were two things. For me, anyways, I won't speak for my husband, but one of the things was that I experienced a dramatic miracle. I got healed from bipolar disorder. And through that process, I began to question many of the core tenets of Reformed theology. And it kind of set me down a path of needing to rethink things related to miracles. And then the second thing that happened to me is that I began investigating more ancient faith traditions and the charismatic tradition more. So then I eventually left Reformed theology altogether because I'm not as convinced anymore that God does predestine people in the way that the Reformed people conceive it. I have been more persuaded of other points of view. So I think that, but you are right, Jawad, Reformed people do believe that predestination, their version of predestination is that God elected his people from the beginning. So they would say, before the foundations of the world, God elected certain people unto salvation and certain people unto damnation. And that free will, what we call free will or choice, does not enter into it. I'm no longer persuaded that that's actually what the Bible teaches. So
yeah, I was going to say, we need to do a whole video on this then. Because where does free will set in with this, and how does all that work? And we don't have time for all that today.
No, but
we really don't.
But people wanted to know, why did you leave the Reformed Church? Well, that's why I just became skeptical that predestination and the way that the Reformed people conceive it was accurate, and I just am not persuaded that. I don't like the term free will because it's a very technical, philosophical idea. But I do think that God calls us to make a declaration of faith, and that we must push into that, and that we must mortify our flesh, and that we must exert our will in doing that. So anyways, that hopefully that helps people understand why I left. All right, our friend Jawad says, to be honest with you, predestination spoils the free will doctrine. It makes Christianity counter to Islam and Judaism. Well, I would say that not all Christians, I want you to be clear, Jawad, that not all Christians believe in this type of predestination. It is one stream of Christianity. Just as you have in Islam, you have different streams of Islam with slightly different emphases. In Christianity, we also have different streams with different emphases. And I just left this one stream of Christianity because I was just no longer convinced of predestination for probably for some of the reasons that you're talking about. So anyways, let's see. Oh, Laura Hartley says predestination and free will could be a whole show in itself. Oh,
I just said that. We are like twins. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't know. Do I want to do that show? I hate that topic.
Yes. We will be doing that show.
Nobody wants to know about that.
Yes. Come with all your questions, because I will come with mine, because, hello, people,
Bring Mike on. You can talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, we will. I think that's a show that needs to happen, because I need to learn too.
Annette says predestination doesn't mean that God only chooses certain people to go to heaven. It means we are predestined to be conformed to the image of Christ. Well, that's actually not completely true, Annette. If you read R.C. Sproul's classic book, Chosen by God, he argues very clearly in that book that the standard Reformed view is that God predestines some unto salvation and others to damnation. It is a double predestination. Now, yes, we are also predestined unto good works. That's true, but it does mean that God actively chooses some. Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. That is one of their favorite passages in Romans chapter 9. And I sat through hundreds of sermons about that when I was Reformed. So,
but I wonder if I don't know if she's arguing from that stance, or if she's just saying that predestination doesn't mean that God only chooses certain people. Like, I don't know that, and that you can say, I don't, are you saying that are you thinking that she's saying that, like, that the Reform position isn't?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't think?
I didn't read that in that.
Here's the limitation of text.
Yes. I'm like, what are you saying?
Have grace.
Yes.
But I would say that the standard Reformed understanding of predestination is it's a double predestination. Mm-hmm. Some unto salvation, some unto damnation. Now, some Reformed don't want to go so far as to say God predestines some to damnation. He just overlooks them. So it's sort of more of a It's a more of a passive predestination. But anyways, so there's that. Okay, so hopefully that gets people over their curiosity of why I left Reformed theology. So what's my perspective now? I did have somebody ask me that yesterday privately. I have a whole note on my Facebook page about my denominational point of view. I call myself kind of a charismatic Anglican. I really like ancient faith traditions. I've come to appreciate the ancient faith perspective, but there's some aspects of the charismatic tradition that I like, not the excesses, but there's some parts of it that I think are helpful and useful. But I like to also share my faith actively in like an evangelical. I think that witnessing to people is very important. I don't think that we should advocate a theology that people are merely born into it and it's merely a culture. We need to go out and actively share our faith. So I'm trying to straddle all three streams of Christianity. Awesome. Ancient faith, charismatic, and evangelical. That's kind of where I come from. So that's what you're going to get from me.
Yes, Annette says, I disagree with Reformed theology. James White.
I do too.
Is a strong proponent to predestination. Do you know him?
Jawad, now the fact, see, I'm a little skeptical that you're a Muslim if you're listening to James White videos. Like you know,
I mean, we listen to other things that we don't necessarily.
But I couldn't name for you like a major Muslim scholar other than Maurice Bukai. But you're right. James White is what is called
That's why I like Jawad, because he come with it. He knows
some things. He's a man of information.
He will get you going.
So James White is what we would call a Reformed Baptist. So he would be in the stream of the 1689 Confession and Charles Spurgeon. I do not know Dr. White. We did a clip about him from his show several weeks ago. If you want to go back in the archives, we did play a show from James White. He's sort of is an interesting personality. His scholarship is generally sound. I just don't agree with him on this issue. There's a lot of issues I appreciate James White about. He largely teaches what I would say is the historic Christian position. I just don't agree with him about Reformed theology or predestination. It's just I take a more ancient faith approach to that issue.
All right. So, and you know what? I'm going to keep us moving on.
Okay.
Because time is of the essence, people.
I can't believe we've been yammering for this long.
It's time for us to go on.
The tweet of the week.
Yes.
Let's do it. Christmas edition.
Yes, I love this.
This is my favorite one.
Yeah, mine too.
I love it. Okay. I saw a tweet this week from a guy. I have no idea who he is. For all I know, he's an atheist, but I don't think so. I didn't vet him or anything. But he just had this tweet. Unpopular take. Small groups tend to create as many problems as they supposedly solve and are vastly overrated by contemporary churches. And so I had posted this on Facebook this week because I've thought about the small group phenomenon. This is something that we've been in this trend of how to do church and doing it through small groups now for 15, 20 years. And I really wish somebody would do a study on what the fruit of that is. Like, how has that shaped the church? What changes have happened? And because I have a theory about it, but I asked our viewers for some takes. So we're going to read a few of those takes here. We've one viewer, I think his name was Daryl.
Daryl, yes. Okay, before we even start, let me tell you about good old Daryl Keith Middlebrook.
Oh, you know this guy?
Yes.
Oh.
Without Daryl and Aunt Dorothy, they go back to my teenage years.
Oh.
Yes. I would not have made it through teenagehood without Daryl Keith Middlebrook and Aunt Dorothy. And then there was another family
this is good to know.
In our church. And
we're glad he's here.
Yes. They definitely kept me from losing all of my teenagehood. Yes.
So they did some good things in your life. They
sowed he's a very good man.
Some good seeds. And here you are today.
Yes.
All right. He said valid point, which can be used, and his valid point was, I think it was in response to Bob's post, but which we'll get to in a minute, which can be used for any grouping of human beings, study groups, exercise groups, corporate ideas groups, not just church groups. Structure, discipline, and prep make for effective and positive groupings. Tossing a bunch of lightly knowledgeable people in a room with a study guide, well, may not get the same results. I would just like to echo an amen about this take, because this is my theory. I really honestly wish somebody would do a study on the impact of the rise of small group dynamics in the church and whether there's any correlation to the lowering of biblical literacy. Because I feel like what we've done is we've made a lot of these groups, and people, like, I'm not sure people are properly trained to have these conversations. And what are the purpose of the groups? And are they just lightly trained? Are they trained at all? You know, what is the outcome of these groups? Let's go to another take here. This one was from my husband, who I'm always glad to hear when he shows up for a conversation. It says, I guess education is inferred. Steve doesn't really clarify. That's the tweeter. Seems like he's only saying small groups bad. For me, I've really enjoyed and benefit from the small group in my church. Can I find something negative about it? Sure. If you put in enough effort, hard work, and are truly dedicated, you can find something negative about anything. And this is why I married this man. He is the most, I love his perspective, because I'll have this all like super complicated take, and then he'll come along and he'll just be like, this is how I see it. And I'm like, wow, that really makes me think. I like that, because I think you're right. Like, if we just had what? Oh, Monique's.
Yes, I wrote a note, people. Yes.
All right. She's telling me to be quiet.
Yes.
Right.
Not in so many words. I said we need to wrap up. Right. Since you put it out there for the dark web to hear. Yes. Sorry.
I want to talk about small groups.
You guys.
All right.
I love and appreciate everyone here.
All right.
I do, but I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about small groups. I just think we should also be respectful of everyone's time.
All right.
And that's all I'm saying. I think we should finish. I wasn't trying to cut you off, but since you put it out there, I'm going to be honest with what I said.
All right. So anyways,
we need to hurry.
Those are my thoughts about small groups. So we'll just leave it right there.
Too often small groups are nothing more than opinion roundtables. You know.
See, this is what I'm saying.
Jeremy, I can feel you on that one. And Annette says, Jawad, you should listen to Andy Wood's videos. He used to be Calvinist, but is no longer. He's an amazing Bible teacher. If you're in a mega or semi-mega church, you get to know no one. My church is small, so eventually you know most people.
Yeah. And I think that sort of was the genesis of the small group model, was a lot of these mega churches, and they're like, how are people going to know each other? Well, let's break them into small groups. And which I think is fine in principle, but I'm just wondering about the training, like, and what impact this has, because I agree with the comment about they're often nothing more than opinion roundtables. I agree with that. And I'm not sure that that's actually helping to grow and develop anyone's, knowledge of scripture, their spiritual life, what's happening in small groups. I think there's some pros and cons about the small group model. My hope is that eventually this trend will wane and we'll go to something else. Where
I think if you're getting in the scripture, something good is going to happen, because God says, my word doesn't return to me void. So you don't know what's going on in people's hearts.
Yeah.
You're starting to read through scripture.
But so many of them don't even open their Bibles. They just talk.
Well, what do they? That's true. But all the small groups I go to, we're reading the Bible, and,
that's good.
We're talking about what it means and thoughts and comments about
What about the intergenerational component? This is another one of my concerns, is that so often the small groups are divided in according to like season of life. So you get all these people in the same season together. What about the intergenerational component that, where's the wisdom of the older generation speaking into the younger generations?
Well, in the men's group I'm at, we got quite a variety of ages in our group. So that's always good. I always love to hear different people. So But I think as long as you're getting into the Word and you're talking about and discussing about it, thinking about it, these are seeds being planted in your heart, so that God's going to use something with it. So
yeah, I would really like to see some small groups talk more about Scripture. I mean, there's a lot of small groups that they read books about the Bible, but or they watch videos about the Bible, but a lot of times they don't actually read or dive into that much of Scripture. And so I don't know, pros and cons. This is some of my thoughts and concerns about small groups.
Yeah, I haven't been the biggest fan. I always get put in the single people's group. And then I thought
you were going to say, I always get put in the black people's group.
No, that is funny. I always get put in the single people's group, and it just annoys the mess out of me because most single people are a lot younger than I am.
Yeah.
And then like people are always, it always comes up. Hey, so I have a question about writing my resume, because like they're just going to graduate college soon. And and I'm just like, I'm kind of past this stage. I would like to talk about something other than, my singleness, even though, that's something that can come up. But like, why can't I discuss that in a circle of married people? Or, I don't like that churches, in my experience, tend to categorize people based on what they think their needs are, instead of being like, hey, let's put people in here, just get in this group, and people will kind of opt out or switch groups and, do what they need to do for themselves.
But that's exactly my point about the intergenerational thing. It's like, why do we have to group people together according to their life stage? That, which is often how it's done.
Yeah.
Now, Bob's group, the men's group that he's in, it's not like that, but oftentimes it is like that. And
can I join a men's group? No, I'm just playing, y'all. Don't play. I am still a work in progress. Praise him.
Monique needs a husband. She wants to join the men's group.
Sorry, folks.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to end.
Yes. Susanna says, she said something about, yes, and divided by marital status. Yes. Okay. We're going to end. We are going to end. They should be required to open their Bible. Yes, they should. We
agree.
All right,
my friends. Sorry it's so long tonight. We
were just clowning around, enjoying the time,
having fun.
Hope you enjoyed it too. Yes.
And we want to let everyone know to make sure to share the show, and I'll post throughout the week some shorter clips from the show. But like, follow, share. Really, that's the best way you can help us get the word out about the show. And also follow us, like our new
Facebook page.
All the Things Facebook page.
All the Things show. Yes. All right, you guys.
Thank you so much. And we will see you next week. Merry Christmas, everyone.
We'll see them before Christmas, right?
Okay. Sure.
I think we will. Yes. The 21st.
God willing.
Yes. We will see you before Christmas.
I'm so wishing you a Merry Christmas.
Okay. Bye.